welcome on stage.
Check one, two. Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Charlie, managing partner of LucidBlue Ventures. I have a hard time conflict of force. That's why I speed up actually 1 hour ago. So today I want to talk about something might be interesting for somebody, especially for the people who are doing Web3 projects. It's a workshop, so I try to be as least salesy as possible. I'm not selling anything. I'm trying to share information. We'll be very freestyle. A lot of thoughts about design principle, how to build ecosystem, how to design tokenomics, right? So a bit about me. I was building Polkadot ecosystem back in 2017 to 2020. I was building ecosystem for Polygon last year as a head of China and South Asia. In between, I was also working for Polkadot for a bit. So 3 major layer 1 public chain experience. Now running full time my venture fund called LucidBlue Ventures. We're setting up a fund to Singapore as well. So yeah, previous speaker talking about legal structure, all that, we go through that as well. Helped quite a lot of projects actually building things. I'm a gaming nerd myself. So we saw a lot of GameFi, Metaverse projects since last year. Some of projects we helped on the tokenomics and things. So today is really kind of just trying to share some of the observations and our thoughts. Some might be a bit random. It's not hard science. It's really learning, trial and error. And I think tokenomics is an art. It's not like a science, so to speak. It really varies a lot. Depends on timing, depends on a specific project. So I picked 4 very interesting projects, considering we are now in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, right? So one of the most famous project is Axie, right? Everybody knows Axie. One of the most iconic, and I would say successful, but also controversial project in the Web3 space last year, right? They had their home run. They actually was one of the first categorical, let's say, play-to-earn project, right? They made everybody understand what is play-to-earn. Web3 gaming is not a new idea, right? I remember back in 2017, the ICO phase, there's a lot of blockchain gaming already started. But at that time, there was no DeFi. There's no interesting tokenomics design around NFTs. How NFT and the fungible token, NFT, non-fungible token has a relationship with each other. And the chart doesn't say that much, right? Chart is just the result. So if we want to design a tokenomics, we want to be the creator, builder. Of course, this may not be the ones the result we want to engineer. And to be honest, those kind of charts should tell 2 things. One is alpha, one is beta. Beta means when the market is everything crashed down, including the Bitcoin, Ethereum, all that, things will crash down in the unit of fiat, right? Right now, this whole chart is all US dollar as a way, right? So a lot of the value goes down because Ethereum or Bitcoin goes down as well. So it's very difficult to be the outlier, right? When everything is crashing, your tokens, the project is still kind of increasing a lot. It's almost impossible. But along the ways, you want to see the alpha. You want to build an alpha yourself, right? So that's kind of what I'm trying to, with my kind of humble inspiration, with a lot of projects, over hundreds of projects, to share some stuff. We all know Luna as well. I think fundamentally, technically speaking, Luna built with Cosmos SDK was a technically solid project. They had their desk spiral, right? It was a bad design with algo stablecoin. They used the Bitcoin as a collateral. That was a mistake. When you realize your fundamental collateral assets intrinsic value was an underlying asset which is actually in the downtrend, that's a problem, right? People don't realize it because they always have the assumption that some assets will always go up, which is very, very difficult, pretty much impossible, especially in the crypto space. A lot of things are very cyclical, right? I'm in the space since 2014, so I saw multiple bear run, and we are definitely right now still in a bear run. And honestly speaking, one of the best projects always comes from the bear run, or at least they start from the bear run. One of them I would say is Curve, one of the most successful and I think long-lasting DeFi blue chip project built on Ethereum, right? Together with Aave and so on and so forth. Many projects they started when they were nobody understand their category. And that was actually the time to build things, and they kind of harvest in the bull run. So what exactly is tokenomics, right? So there's a very interesting chart, very controversial. I don't represent what they said, but it's an interesting chart made by a tweet made by David, one of the OG in the space. But actually can summarize a lot of interesting stuff. In the entire crypto space, we have multiple consensus, right? Start with big one, that's proof of work. Proof of work we use, putting aside the SHA 256, the computation power, all the equation, all that, right? It's proof of work, meaning computation power is a way, as a cost, to have a fair way to mine coin, right? It's proof of work. But there's a total supply limitation, it's a deflation model, right? And then we have proof of stake, right? Ethereum now moved to proof of stake, right? There's many other layer ones of proof of stake. Proof of stake is a different kind of philosophy, right? It's not focusing on computation power, but there's a total supply as well. They're trying to design utility around that. Normally there's a gas fee, right, for a network fee. So it's a consumption, that's a deflation model. A lot of the ICOs kind of use a very quick and dirty way to design proof of stake tokens. They have like proportion, they sell to the investors. A lot of them didn't have any utility. It was pretty much built from thin air. That's why majority of the ICOs crash, right? Because when they buy stuff, they feel like, okay, I have nothing besides a quick flip of that token. Of course, most of them actually crash. That was an industrial failure. It was kind of a trial by doing. But then we have interesting model, which is decentralized finance, right? So 2020 was an interesting year. We realized a new tokenomics model, right? For token distribution, for yield farming, right? There's a lot of interesting yield farming liquidity pools. Some are actually very risky, actually even a bit scammy, right? But I think some are actually with intrinsic value, with kind of financial kind of utility, with lending, insurance, and all that. So I'm trying to kind of just give a big example, right? It's really just tipping the iceberg about tokenomics. I think tokenomics as a course or whatever can take at least a day to talk about it. I'm certainly not the real expert. Even though I saw hundreds of projects in the space, I would say less than 10% of the projects in the space have a very solid tokenomics. So we try to share some stuff in the space, right? So one of them in the DeFi space, I would say, is really focusing on, if you want to build a DeFi product, right? So what is their value creation and value recruiting, right, in the system? So today I'm talking about design principle, right? So I'm trying to not deep dive into this specific project. This is a project probably if you really are in the DeFi OG, you will know what it is. So but putting aside, deep diving into this specific project, you see multiple elements here, right? One element is the counterparties, right? Who is actually interacting the protocol, right? Who are the lender, who are the borrower, who are the protocol governance, right? So that's very important to understand who are the counterparties, right? Who is interacting with your protocol, right? Who is providing liquidity, who is borrowing assets, who is giving collaterals, and what's the incentive around that, right? So design a DeFi tokenomics require good understanding about multi-party game theory, right? What's the incentive for them if they provide the liquidity or whatever? What are the rewards? Ideally, you do not want to give rewards too quick because it goes to the death spiral very quickly, right? Things like that. So of course, we can go to a lot of details of the quantitative numbers, like then we need to run simulation. It goes to Excel sheet. Unfortunately, today I'm not that well prepared on the number part. But with this kind of chart, I want to give you some examples. So if you're building a DeFi stuff, really need to drill down who are your counterparties. So one kind of random thoughts after all the things happened recently with FTX, right? I think that was a very hard lesson the industry learned, which is counterparty risk, right? How to calculate counterparty risk? Who are you trading against each other, right? What's your risk with it? And if you are a builder, if you're a platform builder or protocol builder, you need to understand who are the people you're interacting, right? Because that's very important. If people buying a token with fundamentals, they need to understand it with a rational investor on it. Of course, DeFi sometimes, unfortunately, a lot of the consumer or token buyers are not necessarily always very rational. But I think for the project who can go through the infinite games, who go through the multiple bear run, you need to design a sustainable tokenomics that a rational investor, real intrinsic users wants to interact with that, right? Not just the people who go for the moon, the moon boys, right? And then we'll talk about GameFi, or previous speaker also talked about DAO, right? So the Web3 version of gaming, or let's say DAO or some other GameFi stuff, the value transfer, the value flow is very different. Right? This is a nascent chart. I think I use quite a lot. I talked with the founder Alex as well about this. So I think the traditional gaming side, or let's say a lot of the content service platform, it's very linear, right? You produce something, you create something, you go through platform distribution, and then you talk to the consumers. In the Web3 space, it's not just that linear. It's not just like a user flow chart, like acquisition, activation, retention. That's it. A lot of the customer in the Web3 gaming side, they actually are also the token holder, NFT holder, which by default is part of the ownership, right? They're the owner of the game or the product. They actually want to participate in the governance. By default you want to interact or build your own DAO system. So a lot of the GameFi project have a governance token, right? So what does the governance token mean really on this value recurring system, right? To build an interesting game, of course, you need to have good content. But what does this governance token really mean in this whole process, right? So that's a harder question. Philosophically, a lot of GameFi projects fail to answer, right? They kind of just issue a token for the sake of, okay, you use that for quick liquidity farm. I don't think that actually works. After all the crashes happened last December, I would say majority of GameFi projects fail to answer one question. What is the value recurring system? By being a user, being a distributor, or being a DAO member in the GameFi project or Web3 gaming project, what does it really do? What kind of value they can really get by holding that token and so on? So that's a very important topic to design your tokenomics for Web3 gaming, right? So then there's a bunch of other new protocols. This is just one example as an NFT protocol. I don't want to overcomplicate or overwhelm you with all this diagram out there, because for me as an investor who look at this chart, I feel it's overwhelmingly confusing, right? For successful tokenomics, normally speaking, it doesn't go through that route. You don't have to capture every single contractual relationship with each other, make people confused what exactly happens on that, right? So this is I would say this is a bad example of tokenomics. Try to overwhelm people, especially investors, with overcomplicated diagrams, right? Fundamentally, this design principle in the gaming side, it goes through some stuff like we have been talking to a lot of interesting Web3 gaming builders. One is, if you want to design a financial incentive layer for your gaming users, right? So there's one like a rebase model, kind of interesting stablecoin mechanism, right? Which the other side was actually the chart of SLP. So why I want to put this as a comparison is, if you wanted to have a token that kind of settle as a settlement layer for your gaming economy, right? Intrinsically, you need to design as a rebase model, a model that you use part of your revenue or profit actually can buy back and so on. So you need to have a dynamic, stable price kind of payment token that can settle for the settlements within the game. SLP's model, like unlimited supply, their all-time high was their launched product and it perpetually goes down. It's not really motivating for a lot of the gaming, game players and guilds, right? So that's actually the very hard argument. Like for a lot of the games, why would I actually spend, the SLP, the token, the yield farm actually for buying new token, to breed the NFTs, right? So level up. The whole purpose of level up with NFT is to get more XLPs. Whereas the SLP, because of its, it's not really stable, it perpetually goes down, right? So it's very demotivating. So for good and a sustainable Web3 gaming, GameFi tokenomics, finding a very solid rebase kind of financial layer that can for settlement is very important. So that's a topic that I see. Interestingly, some other projects kind of do that. Skyweaver as well. Skyweaver is a Polygon project. They use USDC as a stablecoin and they raise money with equity. So it's a game studio with equity raise, multi-game, but it have a settlement with the industrial accepted stablecoin for settlement. So that's a route I think more and more AAA or high quality Web3 gaming projects kind of go through as well. Because at the end of the day, you want people to stay in your game, right? So they want to use the token that is stable, repurchase. They had a way to work to earn, right? Like play to earn, whatever we call this, or play to own. But if the intrinsic value of the token or NFTs just perpetually goes down because of the total supply issue and also the tokenomics issue, it's not really motivating for the old players to stay and retain, and also definitely not looking good for the new players to come in, and then become like very short-term games. So that's a problem for if you want to design a long system of infinity games, you need to think about. Of course, tokenomics. One final part, actually that's the easy part. If you have a very sustainable mechanism to design, then you have this chart, right? This is a chart every single project needs to go through. If you want to issue a token, whatever is the utility token or governance token or others, you need to have a distribution. The numbers sometimes are very optics, right? You kind of play by the go with the flow. 10%, 20% with foundation, with team, with VCs. A lot of these actually are very art. Like it varies a lot. There's no hard rule in the industry so far. After seeing over 1,000 projects, these numbers always change. But I think at the end of the day, there's a couple of things that doesn't change. One is they want to know the initial total supply, right? You do not want to have a dump fest when the project launch. Everybody is dumping like crazy. You encourage people to dump, and then there's no way you can support the sale pressure, right? So lockup is really needed. Right, you need to engage with the long-term investor, buyer that actually are willing to accept the lockup period, investing schedule. And then for the project's owners who wants to build interesting stuff, right? The foundation token, the team token, or some other token that belongs to the team, right? It's not necessarily hard ownership, right? Some of them needs to go through a smart contract locker and have a release schedule. So that was quite a lot of fun, right? With a project actually everybody knows, which is called Aptos, right? When they launched, I think I forgot the number. It was like around like 80 or something % of the token actually just all belongs to the team, and a lot of them actually are not going through the smart contract locker, meaning they can actually dump it, right? Participate and joining this liquidity pool. So that was a huge fun, right? When they launched, so people actually questioning that. So I think if you want to build a sustainable token project, which is transparent, the community members wants to respect that, wants to make sure you guys are trustworthy, go through the smart contract locker, right? Have a programmable way to release token with a schedule, right? Otherwise it's very difficult to justify. Okay, you're not going to misbehave or not, right? Because people can question you that. So that's the tokenomics. Right, I wish I could have more to share because it's really case by case. There's no such a thing, okay, this is best tokenomics for everything, right? Very different applications have different way of tokenomics because you're designing different features, right? And we're talking about different visions, so it's really case by case. But the reason I want to talk about ecosystem building is whatever tokenomics you design, if you don't have a really good ecosystem, if you're building a shitty product, it doesn't matter because you're not creating value. You can't really have a successful token, long sustainable, everybody like it, without providing value, right? It doesn't make sense. For me, that's bullshit, right? Like you need to have a solid project. If the project is solid, with a lot of users, a lot of unique wallet address and fundamentals, the tokenomics is something you shouldn't fuck up, but it's like something you design along the ways. So I would say ecosystem building is more important than tokenomics. It goes hand in hand, right? So what does it mean? Ecosystem building, right? That's what we know already, right? Ethereum, I think Ethereum is one of the most important and most successful ecosystem with the best and the most developer in the world, right? So all these roadmaps, right? All these important milestones is very important for ecosystem building. Meaning, I think ecosystem builder, like, I have to be humble enough. I am not in the same level as guys like Vitalik, right? But I think it's guys like them, they really see a project from nowhere to nobody actually give a shit about them to now a lot of people are diehard fans, right? But the whole journey is difficult, right? So you need to find a way to really socially engage people, build a consensus. Not just talk about technical consensus, but also the community consensus, right? To have a common goal, have a common target, build on that, right? And then with interesting milestone like this, we share the whole journey together, right? We feel that we're part of the history. I think that's the highest level of success of ecosystem building. I'm not talking about, putting everything together, whatever, connecting the dots. Those are the technical stuff. But most successful ecosystem builders, I think they are able to connect people in a high level. We feel like we're part of the history. We're part of the journey, right? We're building something which can change the world. I think a lot of the ecosystem haven't really get that, not even close, right? We have a lot of misalignment, a lot of shit talking in the community, but I think community of Ethereum, they get that, right? At least I feel that way strongly. Of course, there's a lot of other Ethereum surrounded layer 2 scaling solutions. Each project, they are building their kind of ecosystem, right? We have quite a lot of good projects in the Ethereum Vietnam, including Polygon, like some others like Scroll and Stockware, right? Like all these kind of having their own smaller version of ecosystem, right? We're talking about different directions like ZK, OPs. For them, I think the challenge really goes hand in hand into why this direction makes sense, right? How to build a consensus around the builders, developers that you believe in that's the future, and that's the right future. So people kind of have to take a leap of faith, right? You need to communicate the vision very well, and also providing tools and support for the people who wants to build on top of you guys. And then we have all this, I want to kind of just name drop a bit and then talk about how exactly, what does it mean, right, as an ecosystem builder before. But there's a bunch of other layer ones, right? Some of them call themselves the Rust-based scalar solution, right? Sharding, right? Now we have some others. In the past, they claimed themselves as an East killer, right? I think nobody actually dared to actually call that, because most of the East killer, whatever they claim, it's all becoming a joke or failed, right? Even with that, they build together and grow hand in hand with Ethereum. They still need to figure out their ecosystem thing, right? From what I'm understanding, a lot of those layer ones, they're having a hard time to really grow the critical mass of developers and actually let them retain. Sorry. I think the recent scenario happened with FTX, really putting a hard challenge for Solana, right? I don't know who else is actually Solana Maxi here. I'm not sure if actually Solana Maxi will be here. But anyway, when things like that happen, they're questioning and challenging your belief on the ecosystem, right? And will that actually be non-sustainable? Because their major whales actually go busted, right? So things like that. So good project very sister or high level project goes hand in hand with Ethereum, including Cosmos and Polkadot, right? I was very, very bullish on Polkadot, I would say, and also Cosmos in the past. Now we're iterating, right? I think it's not just myself and a bunch of other people. Because their vision of building an interoperable new version of Ethereum or networks, right? Having a hard time to justify themselves economically and also a thriving ecosystem, right? So that they're actually in the process of really validating what their vision is actually can empower the long-term Web3 future. The whole Cosmos Hub Zone, the whole relay chain, Parity chain, right? They've been talking about it in the last couple of years, right? But I think there's a hard time to really justify that, especially during this bull run cycle. And then this year, some interesting weird case happened, right? Aptos and 2 former Facebook DIM, move language scaling solution, parallel execution, and network really raised a lot of money. They hit a home run, all the big names backing them, with barely any fundamentals. I'm talking about, interesting builders building on top of them, and unique wallet addresses, and interesting projects built on top of them, right? But they managed to raise over hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of elevation from day one, right? I think for this project, they really need to go through the journey that Move as a language is the future, right? It's a very difficult language, even harder than Rust. People need to learn. They need to go through the journey. It's not necessarily EVM compatible. Why developer building smart contract on top of them, which is solid, right? So that's kind of they need to figure out. So the technical stuff of ecosystem building normally start with that. It's a very big, hairy but important kind of flowchart, right? It goes through the BD, adoption, communication, venture tool, and so on. So that was kind of a simple version. Actually, there's a more complicated version. I designed, I built for some others. So it's like a lot of factors, right? So you need to engage with different levels of people, all the way from the researcher, scientists, to the common fans. Common fans, like the people who just buy the token. They don't necessarily have the developers or tech nerds. But it's all important part of the piece of the puzzle to build an ecosystem. You can engage in them. Different people need to engage them in different ways. You need to generate interesting content and how to find a way to promote and distribute them. And the content needs to go through different routes, right? There's a lot of social media, they have different interaction. People's attention span is different. You need to find a way to engage people. And then you need to categorize the fans or followers through different routes, right? There's a trader route, which we call this investment. So normally for some ecosystem, they have like a trader community, right? So people talk about the sentiment, talk about the interesting news, and then you have the enterprise, right? Talk about only about the utility, talk about adoption, talk about B2B collaboration, right? So I see some good ecosystem, including like Polkadot and so on. They kind of categorize that in a very clear component. All these partners that they find ways to also collaborate with each other, right? So you see a lot of the ecosystem map like that, right? Putting things together. And then another very important technical stuff is engaging the universities, global university, because that's where the talent is, right? So I think the developer relation, aka the university relation, is very, very important for a lot of the layer ones who wants to build a successful ecosystem. Regional adoption, including APAC, like Vietnam, all these important regions is very important, right? I think we are seeing tremendous amount of new developers and solid projects come from Asia, but they need to grow global. There's no project can be very successful just limiting themselves in one region, right? So Web3 project needs to be day one global. So if you are building a chain and building an ecosystem, how to empower those interesting adoption projects to go global? I think that's very important to do when you do an ecosystem building. Yeah, so these are the kind of the stuff, right? How about that project? So if you're building a gaming project, you're building a metaverse project, you also need to have an ecosystem, right? So project like Sandbox, they have a very, very thriving, complicated ecosystem with a lot of B2B partnership, a lot of user groups, a lot of KOLs. Find a way to engage them, incentivize them, let them sustain in your ecosystem, right? And how to engage with some other stakeholders, like the investor, some potential investor, like exchanges, launchpad, gaming guilds if you're building a game, and all the other chain selection if you're building an application, right? It's multi-chain by default. So those are all very important stakeholders if you want to build an application ecosystem. Yeah, so I think I'm running out of time, and thank you very much to share, give me a chance to share these two important topics for Web3. Thank you very much.